Hi, I'm John F. Allen. And I'm R.J. Sullivan. And we're the Two Towers.
Greetings and welcome to the Two Towers Talk Show. I'm your host, Tower 1, John F. Allen.
I'm Tower 2, R.J. Sullivan.
Today we have a special guest interview with a very talented artist and writer in the indie comic book scene. His name is Jiba Molei Anderson. And he, I'm proud to say, is one of my heroes. I really, really enjoy his work. If you're not familiar with it, you should be. GriotEnterprises.com. Check it out. And that's just, go. It's worth it. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce our guest. And I'll let you say some words.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jiba Molei Anderson. I am the publisher of Griot Enterprises and the creator of its flagship title, The Horsemen. I am also the curator of the 4 pages, 16 bars of Visual Mixtape anthology project, writer, artist, designer, educator, secret agent. That's who I am.
Very nice.
And I'm just happy, and I'm happy to be here today, chopping it up with you guys.
All right. And I will pipe in after John and say I was unaware of Jiba Anderson's work until a couple weeks ago. John told me to check it out, and I can agree with John. Great stuff. I am probably 20 years out of the comic collecting business. I haven't checked out much in a while, except the very occasional library volume, but I really love this. Just finished the first issue of The Horsemen in the Divine Intervention collection, and kind of had to put it down to do this, and anxious to get back to it, if I'm being totally honest. But great work. I'm really enjoying it so far.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate that a lot. Actually.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started with this interview. I'm really excited about it. And so one of the first questions I have is, what is your background in art and writing, and how did you get started?
Okay, so my background in the arts, I was literally born into the arts. This is what I mean. On both sides of my family, on my mother's side and my father's side of the family, there are a lot of artists and also a lot of entrepreneurs and business people. My father is an architect. My mother worked for the state of Michigan for many years in social services, but at home she sewed, the cooking, craft work, that sort of thing. As a matter of fact, working with her in terms of helping her make her crafts and things like that. She made stuff and she sold stuff. So she was actually one of the first people that got me into the entrepreneurship of art. With that being said, like I said, my dad is an architect. I'm the oldest of 4. All 4 of us are creatives. As a matter of fact, so, because today's Mother's Day, right? My younger brother, he's a graphic designer, web developer. My youngest brother is a photographer. My sister, baby sister, hair and makeup artist. So we're all up in the mix. And Dad was an original Blurred. Dad was, Mom and Dad were the first Trekkies, because that's when it first came out.
Yeah.
Dad was always a big comic book fan. And so when I was young, really young, like 3, I saw the most wonderful television show on earth, and I didn't know it was in reruns, but it was a little show called Batman, and with Adam West and Burt Ward. And that got me from the jump. And I would always play Batman. My little brother would be Robin, of course. And at that point, I started, scribblings, like little drawings, that sort of thing. Again, in my household, coming from what I like to call a bicultural household, because my mother is from West Africa. She's from Liberia, born and raised. My father is from the States. And so I was born in the 70s, which is, we're going from civil rights to Black Power movement, right? And I grew up in a household where when I was born, my dad painted the map of Africa on our living room wall. So like for the first 13 years of life, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm in that, I have the African artifacts that came from home. I'm in this nerdy space that they, love science fiction, love comics. I'm also in this artistic space because people are making art and making careers of art. And so I started scribbling and drawing, and I started doing stick figures. And like my first stick figure that I remember, I put some ears on it and a cape on it. It was like Batman. And that what got me going and drawing and scribbling. One day, I'd say around 5, I was like 5 or so. My dad brings home the artifact that will change and define my life. He brings home a comic book, and it's a Batman comic book. And I remember this because it was drawn by Jim Aparo, and the villain in that book was Two-Face. And I globbed on it. I was like, wait a minute, Two-Face, this dude isn't in the TV show. Let me see what's going on. And once I opened up the pages and once I saw that mode of visual storytelling, I was hooked right away. And I was hooked in beginning to create characters, things of that nature. When I was 8 at the time, I wanted to be an architect like my father. And then I realized the math involved and I couldn't draw people. So I was like, no, I can't do it. But when I was 10, I realized that comic books, that's what I wanted to do. And come hell or high water, that's what I was going to do. I was going to make comic books. And even at the age of 10, it wasn't a situation of like, ooh, I want to draw Batman for DC one day, or I want to draw, Captain America. I wanted to make my own comic books, and I wanted to. I wanted to make questions. Yeah, I think that is right. Yeah, so from the age of 10, I was like, I want to make comics, and I want to make my own comics.
Okay, so yeah, I know what I was going to ask. I'm sorry. I just had a brain fart there for just a second. Was this all in Chicago? Were you born and raised there?
No, I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I know you got quite a bit of schooling later. What is your ties to Chicago? It seems like I read that.
Yeah, well, I moved to Chicago in '95 for grad school. I moved to come and study at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Gotcha. So when you say you were brought up in an artistic environment, you don't mean because you were living in an artsy area necessarily, or was Michigan like that?
No, it was because it was my home.
Gotcha.
In the beginning, it was my home space, right? Okay. And even then, at a young age with my mom, in order to keep us busy and get us out of the house in the summers and things of that nature, she saw early on, it was like definitely myself and also my brother, we were interested in the arts. So she would put us in, art programs throughout the city. Detroit with the Detroit Institute of the Arts, the DIA. I grew up there. You know what I mean? A lot of
that's fantastic. Yeah.
And also like just coming up and doing, after school programs and pre-college programs. Like, it was very fascinating. Before I went into high school, I was doing a summer program where I learned to paint fresco, which is, this dead art. And I learned it from, right. And I learned it from Steve Pablo Davis, may he rest in peace, who was a radical socialist Jewish muralista who actually worked with Diego Rivera back in the day. He actually worked on the mural that's in the DIA. So at 13, you know, I'm there in this artistic spirit, and then I'm also getting like this political, radical, you know, mindset in place, which was also very instrumental in defining who I would be as an artist first, but also as a comic book creator in terms of what I was going to make, what was I going to do, what was going to be sort of my thesis statement, my artist statement, if you will, in this business and in the art world in general.
Okay.
So,
John, you want to go first, or do you want?
Oh, I've got some stuff. So one of the questions you already answered, which was regards to your first experience with comic books, because that was an important thing. So thank you for answering that without even being asked. I love that. So I'm going to piggyback this next question with some thoughts and ideas with regards to what you just said with fresco. So I've never created any fresco type work, but in college I took art history. So this is about you, but it's about it. But I'm saying this to say that that's why when you said that, I was like, oh wow. You know, this is like some Sistine Chapel type stuff. You know, this is like the, you know, I'm envisioning like the griot standing amidst all of the children who are listening to him tell the stories of old. And then there's a fire, and then there's like, you know, corrals around and stuff like that. You know, that's where my mind goes. So when you were saying that, that was what was on my mind, and I just wanted to express that to you. That was my vision when you were talking. I was like, oh wow, you know, and so yeah.
I know. I appreciate the vision. I really appreciate the vision. It wasn't that sexy at all. I will say, I will say this. It's like, I'm learning fresco, and Steve had these two older cats, these other brothers, white dudes, right? And they were learning the same thing, and they were the ones at the time. They were talking about, yo, did you hear like Run DMC and Aerosmith do Walk This Way? And you know, and stuff like that. So I appreciate the vision of the ancient griot with the Sistine Chapel and all that other good stuff. Like, I love that. You know, I may use that for my mythology, if you will. But it was Detroit in 86 going in 87.
I want to be a hip guy too. That kind of thing, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It was Detroit. I'll say this, like, I mean, I've lived in Chicago, almost 30 years, something like that now. But, you know, heart and soul, I'm still a Detroiter. Like, Detroit, as much as everything else, is a key influence in my work. Just growing up in that post-industrial town, growing up in a city that was very much a chocolate city during my time, growing up from going into Motown and Detroit becoming the home of Detroit techno. You know what I mean? Like, all of that stuff informs my work, because, you know, I was ground zero when all of that stuff was happening. Mm-hmm. And even now, you know, my ties to Detroit, you know, they include the music industry, they include techno, because, you know, I know the players, that sort of thing. Outside of comics, you know, I do work, you know, in music and all these other spaces, but Detroit is a key influence on who I am as a creator. And that even ties into some of the Detroit comic book artists like Jim Starlin, like whose dude's on the tip of my tongue. He started off doing Baker Street, then he did Sandman Mystery Theater. Gosh, that artist's name is on the tip of my tongue. From him to Dwayne McDuffie, because we both went to U of M. So many cats. Arvell Jones, Todd Johnson of Tribe. I used to go to his comic book store back in the day when I was in college before Tribe came out. So it's like, yeah, Detroit helped shape who I would become as a creator.
Okay. So with regards to that, the question that I had is, as a comic book artist and writer, what do you find to be the most challenging thing, especially as an indie creator? Because, people get jobs at the big two, and then the smaller four, and then, then there's the people who publish their own stories and have creative control over their own projects or whatnot. And as an indie creator, what do you find to be the most challenging thing?
This week, the most literally this week, the most challenging thing is that I am behind on a deadline writing for a role-playing game that I really have to knock out. The reason why it's difficult is because my headspace has been currently in working on this new Horsemen book, Manifest Destiny, which I'm getting ready for the Kickstarter to launch around my birth month, August, so I can have a fall release. So at this point right now, like, my head and my passion is in drawing these pages and getting those together, because I'm really loving what I'm doing right now. But I've got the responsibility of doing this other thing. The toughest thing that I found for me recently has been how to get out of different modes. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm in a drawing mode, I want to be in that drawing mode. When I'm in my season of writing, I want to just be in my season of writing. When I'm in my season of design, I just want to be in my season of design. If I want to do marketing, if I want to be in my season of marketing and advertising, I would love to have those be in those, seasons. However, with my life, it's like certain, those other aspects of what I do,
right,
they enter it. So I have to kind of like switch modes, right? And sometimes abruptly switching my mode when I'm in a vibe in a different area, right? So right now, I'm in my vibe of being an illustrator. Right now, I am having visions of like these images that I'm going to be drawing for Ogun Season of Ice. And I just got done with the first 2 pages, and they blew me away, thank God. And so now I'm like, yeah, I'm all about, let me really get into this. And then I get the emails like, oh yeah, how about those tribes from Mage? Have you written those yet? And I'm like, yeah. I gotta get out of it. I gotta get out of that mode. In this, so at this point right now, I kind of feel like Pookie in New Jack City, where I got to do the writing, but the Horsemen, they keep calling me,
mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. So that's, for me right now, that's the difficulty, is just switching, you know what I mean? Switching modes and doing it. I have to do it, so I'm going to do it, but
reality dictates that your passions sometimes need to be put aside. I do copywriting, and I have the creative writing side as well. And sometimes I can't have fun. I have to got to do the work, even though I'd rather be doing the creative stuff.
Right. And the weird part, here's the weird part about that, right? It's not like the role-playing game stuff I'm writing is dry. I mean, I'm being completely creative, but it's just right now, I want to be drawing creative.
Isn't that where your head is? Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Let me take you back a little bit. When you were finishing up your education, and the comic scene was, or are we talking mid-90s? Is this when we were looking at that?
With the undergrad, yeah. So, like my undergrad years, I graduated in 94. That's when, Milestone really took off. That was after Brother Man made the big splash. Actually, that's when Tribe first dropped. So those 3 moments, that was definitely the deciding point for me to get into comics. Gotcha. And then the undergrad years, 95 to 98, as I was getting my degree, that's when I first entered the comic book arena on the independent scene. That was also where the Horsemen were being created, because the Horsemen actually came out of my graduate thesis.
Okay, so my question was going to be: did your education prepare you for business ownership and being an indie creator, or were you kind of coming in at ground zero? And I have a follow up on that, but
okay,
let's speak to that first.
Let me say this: yes and no.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I would say yes in terms of, college gave me the space. College and graduate school gave me the space to develop my vocabulary as an artist. It gave me a space to learn about technique. It gave me a space to actually begin really my exploration into my deep exploration into African faith systems and things of that nature. As a business person in art, school didn't help me out. I actually had to talk to school to get them to start talking about the business of art. So in grad school, when I got into grad school, one of the things I looked at, I was like, artists really don't have any business classes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as an artist, 9.5 times out of 10, especially if you're going to be a fine artist or any kind of creative, you're ultimately going to be an independent contractor, right? That's just going to be your life. And so, again, with my mom putting me to work on her craft and stuff like that, learning how to make money as an artist, I actually learned some of those things myself, like by doing it, by reading books and that sort of thing. When I got to grad school, and then I talked to them, to SAIC, about like, yeah, y'all don't have any classes. That's when I actually got thrust into academia. So SAIC, at which point they're like, hey, you have some good ideas. Hey, why don't we get you to go to some of these conferences? And hey, why don't you become a TA and help create a class on the business of art? Because hey, you just become like the Black Student Union president of SAIC. I mean, it was just, SAIC was an interesting, it was a very, very interesting time.
Well, that'll teach you for asking the question, right?
Also that kind of set me on the path to be the one that came up with the solution. Like gotcha. that taught me, like, okay, if I'm going to ask the question, that means I'm thinking about the question. That means that I'm kind of like the only one thinking about the question. And if I'm the one who came up with the solution, I guess I have to do it, because I can't trust anybody else to do it, because they'll keep asking the question.
Right. Absolutely.
As we see time and time again and constantly, especially in the Black comic space. I could talk about that later. But definitely at that certain point, what schooling taught me actually how to seek more knowledge. And schooling also taught me that I am in control of my own destiny. That's the thing that that schooling really taught me. Because being in those institutions and whatnot, I learned how to navigate my own space. I learned how to gain access to like resources that people didn't think about before.
I got
And
you.
some of that was by accident. Some of that, was by personality, and again by luckily being raised with the parents that I have that have always taught me, self-reliance, resilience. My father is a chess player, so in terms of the mentality of chess, applying it to life, I definitely thank my parents for, and schooling institutions taught me how to navigate that space and how to, in some ways, be a Brer Rabbit, if you will, and navigate those areas.
I gotcha. So, my follow-up on that was, when did you form Griot Enterprises? Let me get a date on that.
Griot? Griot was formed in 1997.
Okay, so the comic industry, I think it's fair to say, was certainly going through interesting times. Did you pause at all at the idea of creating your own indie comic book company, or did you feel like you had a solid enough plan that you went for it? What was your thought process at the time you went ahead and incorporated?
Okay, so Griot Enterprises, it definitely came about because initially myself and my two other partners at the time, we were inspired. I was definitely inspired by two developments. I was inspired by the emergence of Image Comics, and I was inspired by the emergence of Milestone Media. With Image Comics, what that showed is that you could be independent, own your own, and be financially successful at it. Yes. What Milestone showed was that you could create images that were authentically yourself, and they will be financially viable. I also, during that time, I did work in a comic book store. So I was also at ground zero with all of these explosions in it, and then all of these implosions as well. So, I was at ground zero on the retailer level when Marvel did the Heroes World debacle.
Yes.
And they went completely bankrupt. I was there through the whole Bad Girl movement, the chromium covers, all of that.
I was collecting
all of that garbage. Like, I was there, right?
It was a rough time.
It was a fascinating time. And honestly, I don't think that it was a rough time. I think that it was a time where you saw a lot of people trying to figure out, a new space. The new space was also being kind of, I wouldn't say held back because it was the times, but it was like, new spaces, new paradigms, and old models, right? Mm-hmm. And what I saw during that time is that I did really see indie stuff really, really beginning to come up. You know what I mean? Really doing some things. Don't get me wrong. There was a lot of crap in there, but I was finding the diamonds in the rough. I was like, I was finding my peers at the time, like the cats that, I was looking at, that I am glad to be associated with now. But, that was during the time that Jamal Igle was first coming out, doing his stuff with Blackjack. Same thing with Ken Lashley. During that time when all of this stuff was developing, I, met Alex because of Blackjack, meeting Alex Simmons. I was seeing I was becoming or learning to become, I guess, the second, if you will, the second class of the Black comics movement in the late 90s. So during that time when we were doing that, and Griot came about because we were at Motor City Comic Con. All right. And I had just gotten done doing like my first indie work, JDD, The Devil's Due. And I was there with Kenji Jumani Marshall and Michael Larson. They were the original iteration of Griot Enterprises, the original band, if you will.
Okay. Yeah.
And we were all creators and we were all trying to get in, right? and I had my JBD pages, and I was walking around, and one of the things that happened was like, as when I started getting into comics, you know, I was meeting all my heroes. I started a very friendly relationship with George Perez. He was kind of like a mentor. Like, I first met him, I was like, ooh, he's a fan. And then I saw him again, and it's like, and he's like, oh, hey, Jiba. I'm like, oh, God, you remember me. You know what I mean? Like, that sort of thing. And just an amazing, gregarious, just the gentleman.
You see the Wonder Woman poster behind me.
Yeah, like,
big George Perez fan.
Let me just say, I just had a geekgasm that you actually met the man. I mean, I've been a fan since I was a kid, and when he first started, when I saw his like work with Marvel, develop him as an artist. So like the first time I saw him, I was like, okay, I wonder who this new guy is. But then the next time I saw him, it was like, wow, he went from like 3 to 15 in just a matter of a few, months worth of work, and then he didn't look back. And then he instantly became my hero. So I'm sorry, I was geeking out.
No, cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's quite all right. I mean, he's definitely one of my heroes, and I'll finish up with him in a moment, because if you like the story that I know him, you'll love this story that I tell about him after. But I was at the con and showed him my stuff. I also showed my stuff to Steve Rude, who was also, I'm also a big fan of. And Steve Rude, when he looked at my portfolio at that time, he was like, you know what? He was like, in about 5 years, you'll probably be one of the cats that I'm looking at, in terms of work. And I was like, okay, all right, you can't tell me nothing. So that night, after that con, myself, Kenji, Michael, and Michael, we were like, okay, let's start a comic book company. Let's do this. Like, the philosophy was quite simply, why do I have to wait for somebody to discover me? I'm going to discover myself. Right.
Yeah, I got you.
I'm going to put myself out there. I called initially, I was like, Griot Enterprises is the ultimate self-promotional tool. It's going to be the ultimate resume of what I can do, or what we can do. As it turned out, it became so much more. You know what I mean? It became something that, we didn't even see in the beginning. And the full circle thing about the George Perez story. So what was it? 2019, he was on his retirement tour. And the new La Borinqueña book came out. It's another indie book, Puerto Rican creators. But because of Puerto Rican creators, George Perez did a variant cover for the second book. And so, so first day I got the book signed by the writer. I was like, yo, is George Perez going to be here this weekend? He's like, oh, yeah, he's going to be here on Saturday, something like that. I'm like, cool. So, and at that time, I had just gotten done with the Horsemen Lumumba Funk book, which I was really, really proud of at the time. And so I found George, and he was like, oh, hey, Jiba, how you doing? I was like, yeah, I'm so glad. It's like, look, I'm so glad. Like, I just wanted you to sign this book. I know you're retiring, and I just wanted to thank you, just for inspiring me, what I mean? Just for like all the things that you have done, tangentially. And I gave him, the copy of Lumumba Funk. And he said to me, he was like, you know what? I am so proud of how far you've come in this industry. And that was like the second, like, Kung Fu Master moment.
I feel you.
That I had, like, when you have one of your heroes, and this is my artistic hero, right?
Yes.
You have one of your heroes, and that tells you, like, they're proud of how you have come, how far you came in this industry, was huge. That was, you couldn't tell me nothing at that point. The first time it was hard to tell me something was in 2005 when I met Dwayne McDuffie. And at a certain point, this was right when print on demand was first beginning, you know what I mean? Yeah. And the whole digital shift was changing. So it was changing, I was going into that model, right, as it was developing. And so I was working on another book for another company, and I was in San Diego. And at that time, this was when the first Horseman story came out, and I'm like, nobody cares about it, so on and so forth. But, I'm thinking about, getting back into it. So I did some postcards for Griot and that sort of thing while I'm promoting this book. And so the first time I'm at the booth and I'm promoting this other book, and I have these Griot cards, and the first thing was like, these brothers come up and I'm telling them about this book, Hip Hop Chronicles, yada, yada, yada. And then I'm like, oh yeah, and I also do this book, The Horsemen. And those cats were like, yo, you're the dude that does The Horsemen? I was like, yeah. And he was like, yo, hold up a second. And then right back, like, yo, the creator of The Horsemen is right here. He's right here right now. Come meet him. I was like, for real? Like, okay. Like, no, dog, that book was dope. That's the jam, And I'm like, oh, okay. I have fans, And later on, I'm walking around and I see Dwayne, right? And I'm like, and I run up to Dwayne because Milestone were also incidental mentors in my career. But I would go up to Dwayne and I'm like, yo, okay, first of all, fanboy, yo, I'm down with you, been down with you since Milestone days. You're killing it on Justice League Unlimited. Like, I just wanted to say that. And then I was like, yo, I also do a book too. I got my company. Like, we did it. We're coming back. And I handed him a postcard with the Horseman. I'm like, check out the website whenever you can and let me know what you think. And Dwayne was like, The Horseman? Enterprises? That's you? I was like, yeah. He's like, dude, I loved this book. I thought this book was awesome. I was wondering why, I was wondering what happened to you guys. Like, this book was really, really good. And it was because of that statement that Griot was still here today. Because the minute Dwayne McDuffie says that you're a fan, that he's a fan, you know what I mean, of
Sure.
what you do. And the reason why what you do even exists is because what they did inspired you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, come on. So in this world, in this comic book industry, I would say that I have been blessed with having good mentors and meeting my heroes, and in a large part, my heroes were my mentors. You know what I mean? Incidentally, like
Mm-hmm.
the Milestone guys, in order for me to develop my work to become Griot Enterprises, like they helped me along just with words. Same thing with Perez, same thing with, Todd Johnson and whatnot. So yeah. So yeah.
Very cool. Well, hey, I was trying to figure out how to work this in, but I think you gave me a great setup. But as I indicated earlier, I was new to your work until I checked it out just a couple of weeks ago. You talked about Image Comics, and I'll say that I think what they were doing was very innovative for the time. I'm less impressed with the actual generation of artists that came from
Like
there
the first
so
generation?
much. Yeah, well, I guess specifically, I don't know. I'm not a big fan
Who
of
is?
Rob
I mean,
Liefeld,
well,
for
I mean,
instance.
yeah. No, I just like no, don't get me wrong. Let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it a buck, okay? The
Yeah.
first generation of Image Comics do not hold up.
Mhm.
They
Right,
don't hold up from a literary standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
They'll even tell you, like, the first generation of Image books by and large were X-Men knockoffs. They were the characters were X-Men.
Right.
They were
Yeah.
basically the versions of the characters that the original 7 were already working on. You know what I mean?
Sure,
And
sure.
but what it
Yeah.
was, but what Image was influential in was not the art style. It was in that maverick idea of, having your own creation and controlling that. You know what I mean? And it was the first time
Absolutely.
that it happened
Yes.
on a big level. Like, it was the first time that shook up the industry,
I absolutely agree. My point being that you got to realize I'm not looking at this in an ideal format. I'm looking at this on my phone here because I downloaded the Kindle and I have to sit here and use my fingers to kind of spread it out and all this other stuff. Your art is so clean and so easy to follow the storyline. I mean, in the last few years, mainly I've been checking out collections of the fairly newer stuff, and the artwork seems like a huge step back. I find myself having to reread stuff over and over again because I can't follow from panel to panel what the hell is happening. I don't know what happened from the 80s into the 90s, but this is just so clean and so easy, and even reading on my phone, I was thoroughly getting into it because everything makes perfect sense. The writing is really on point too.
Oh, thank you.
I need to mention that, but after having read so many recent things that I can't find all that much I'm not into, but it's just nice to go, wow, it's a progression of movement, it's a progression of story, and I can follow just going straight across and easily understand exactly what the points you're trying to make, and very enjoyable artwork. And since you were talking about the compliments you were getting, I thought I'd just throw mine in there as well. So
thank you. I appreciate
like
that.
I said, finishing the first issue, I'm looking forward to getting back into it here. So
no, I think
John, I'm sure you're chomping at the bit to hop back in here.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned inspirations, and you mentioned a lot of people who inspired me as well. George Perez is a huge inspiration for my own artistic endeavors. I'm not as accomplished of a visual artist as you are. I've done some things, but it's mainly like poster art and character creation, sketches. I've done some sequential work, but it was never anything that was published. It was more or less exercises on whether or not I could actually do it. And so that's kind of my talent is stunted compared to yours. But with regards to the writing, is very much in my wheelhouse as of now, because that's my focus. And inspiration from reading Horsemen and looking at some of the stuff that you post in social media and seeing the visuals, and then reading the dialogue and putting that all together, inspiration for me. And within the context of prose novels. And I have to say that a lot of the things that you described in how you were introduced into comics and things are very similar to me. I wish that my mother was encouraging, sometimes maybe too encouraging. That's a whole story for another day. But I did not have that encouragement from my father, who didn't finish high school and wasn't a big reader, and was from that generation of you need to be either a doctor, a lawyer, or engineer, and nothing else mattered, especially as a black man in this country, and so that was his line of thinking. And even though he was and I don't say only, but he was a postal carrier for his entire life, and from the age of 18 until he retired in his 60s. But of course, from an education standpoint, that was great for him. But he saw more in me, but he saw those things. And so the point that I'm getting to is that a lot of what you do is a lot of what I do with regards to putting Black African mythologies and history into your work. And I find that to be not only engaging from a person who's consuming this, but also as a fellow creator. And so how do you personally I would like you to tell our listeners and viewers how you personally incorporate Black history and mythology into your writing and artwork, and why is that so important to you as a creator?
Okay, so that was basically my mission statement for Griot Enterprises going into the mix, especially with the Horsemen. What it was during that time, like I said, we had the first shot across the bow with Black comics, right? And then we had the other books, we had Ania and other stuff coming out. And one of the things that I saw when people, because also this is the 90s, right? This is like the era of Afrocentricity, you know what I mean? Which would then become the Hotep era. Anyway, so I saw a lot of these books and stuff like that, these, with the whole Ania Milestone beef, like Milestone ain't Black enough. Ania, this is where the real Black books are, and saw all these Afrocentric things, and about Afrocentricity, it's all about Egypt and Kemet, don't put the E's in Kemet, you got to spell a KMT, that sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Now, with me being a Liberian, you know what I mean? African American, and I'm looking at Afrocentricity, and I'm kind of like, okay, that's cool, but not really, because if you really think about where Black folk who wound up in the United States and in the Americas and the Caribbean, where they originally came from was Western and Central Africa. And I was like, there are whole different cultures than Africa ain't Egypt. You know what I mean? I mean, Egypt is a part of Africa, but that's not the totality of who we are and where we came to be. Like the Egyptian gods, they are not the totality of our mythology. And being a fan of mythology from a young age and stuff like that, I wanted to showcase other mythologies. And so that is when I began my exploration of the Orishas, right? So this is back in 95, 96, right? So around 2013, when people were talking about, oh my God, like these Black gods and goddesses you never known about, like, like, ooh, look at the Orishas. Ooh, I'm doing this stuff about the Orishas. I mean, I'm like, nice y'all to finally come to the party. you know what I mean? Right. Because again, this was my mission statement. This is what I was going to do. And with the Horsemen, again, when it came to like Black comics and things of that nature, I thought about what wasn't I seeing in comics. And to say like, I'm not seeing Black characters, that's disingenuous, right? Because of course, like during that time, we had a lot of, even then we had a lot of Black characters. I mean, especially in the 90s, we had some great Black characters. We had Black characters that were in the periphery becoming great. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. So I wasn't going to be of that mind, like, I'm creating, I'm gonna create the first Black super, like, I was like, whatever on that. But what I did not see was an iconic African American superhero team. Like, again, being in the comic book stores and, having the comic book conversations, chopping it up, people will be like, okay, you're like, all right, I'm going to put together my Black superhero team. So I'm going to have Black Panther in it. Then I'm going to have Spawn in it. And then I'm going to put Storm in it. And then let me get, let me put Steel in here. In other words, they were like cobbling from other companies to put together this team. And I was like, nah, my goal is to make the iconic Black superhero team. And I also thought, in order for me to do that, what I have to do is I have to create this group, this team, free from the gaze, as I call it now. Free from the influence of the other, because I did not want it to be derivative. And so when I thought about it, I'm like, okay, what is the root of the superhero? I said, okay, the root of the superhero is mythology. Now, if you really think about the root of the American superhero comes from either Judeo-Christian faith, of course, Greco-Roman mythology. Later on, Jack Kirby brought in Norse mythology, right? And then in the 30s, you had this gross appropriation of like Asian, and again, Egyptian cultures, right? So you had that. So I was like, okay, then let me go into African mythology, and then let me not go to Egypt, but let me stay where my people come from. And this is where grad school was helping me out. So I was taking a class at the time on Afro-Caribbean art and ritual. And back in the day, I did theater, and I did a play written by Wole Soyinka called The Lion and the Jewel. And during that play, that was my first introduction to the Orishas, because in terms of like prepping for the play and understanding, the cultures, one of our cultural people gave us this information, right? So I already had that. I was already a mythology fan, and I was reading on African mythology a little bit, because my parents had some books at home. Again, very blessed childhood, right? And so when I was going into this and doing my thesis, which was initially going to be a book about the history of Black superheroes and tying it in with African mythology and using the Orishas, because that was going to be a chapter. Each chapter was going to be an Orisha, and I was going to like break down these Black superheroes based on the ideas of the Orishas. And so I'm doing this in grad school. At the same time, we're talking about Griot Enterprises. And also at the same time, thinking of my first book that I'm going to do for Griot Enterprises, which was a different project. But anyway, as I was working on this book, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to illustrate these gods and goddesses. So that gives me finally my chance to illustrate African gods and goddesses that I wanted to do since I was 16. And then it was like, how do I do it, right? So do I do it in a classic African dress, or do I superhero it up? And it took about, I'd say like 35, 45 seconds. I'm going to be really honest with it. It took about 90 seconds, because I was like, wait a minute. I'm going to go the Jack Kirby route. I'm going to do for the Orishas in African mythology what Jack Kirby did for Norse mythology. And once I started designing those characters, I'm like, okay, this is just too cool to be like my thesis. This is going to be my book from Griot.
Okay.
And that is where the Horsemen came about. The name of the Horsemen came from the book, The Divine Horseman by Maya Deren, who was an authority on the Vodou religion. And the whole notion of the Horsemen was the idea that when a devotee is possessed by a loa, they're being ridden like a horse. And that became like, how did they become the Horsemen? Oh, word. Okay. You know what I mean? They're possessed by the gods. And also during this time, because I'm a music head, hip hop head, Japanese DJ by the name of DJ Crush came out with an album called Miso. And on the title track, Miso, the Roots came out at that time. So, having Malik B and Black Thought on that title track and was super influential, because Black Thought dropped the line, "Who controls the 8 immortal but the number 7 in this continual maze?" I heard that line. I dropped the continual maze. I'm like, who controls the 8 immortals but the number 7? I'm like, boom, there we go, right? So the Horsemen, so the Horsemen is birthed out of all these places. Like hip hop has a part in it, and and all this exploration has a part in that. So when I came to actually doing the Horsemen, I was like, if I'm going to do this iconic superhero team, I'm not going to go the typical route like, oh, we got to clean up the neighborhoods. Oh, drugs. Oh, gun violence, blah, blah, blah. I was like, nah, these are superheroes. So I'm gonna start wars. You know, we're gonna go in different planets. Like, excuse my French, I'm about to blow some shit up. Mm-hmm. And when we were getting into the mix, and this actually goes back to one of your earlier questions, Mr. Sullivan, was in the terms of the space in 1997, like right. The comic book climate, right? So during that climate, right, when we started Griot, I looked at, you know, if we talk about a SWOT, because, you know, as a copywriter, you know, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, you know what I mean? Like, da-da-da-da-da, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I looked at it, and I'm like, okay, we're about to start this company, right? So here are the three strikes. You know what I mean? Here are the three strikes against us. Like, number one, we're an independent company. Number two, we're going to be an independent company that's predominantly African-American. Number three, we are an independent company that's predominantly African-American that are doing books that are from a predominantly African-American viewpoint.
Right. In an industry where basically only two companies are overwhelmingly red.
You're right. Exactly. So I'm like, okay, all right, so those are the strikes against us. How do we counteract that? And I simply said, the way we counteract that is in terms of production and quality levels. At the minimum, we have to be as good as a DC or Marvel comic. At minimum, you know what I mean? If not better, because again, we're African American. That's the whole thing. You got to be twice as good to get half as notice. You know what I mean? Number one, we got to be better. Number two, in terms of my culture and whatnot, what I decided, I was like, look, the Horseman is already going to be infused with my viewpoint, which is this African American viewpoint. When you look at the 7 characters, you're going to see, yeah, they're Black, right? Like, This is what it is. I don't need to harp on that fact. I don't need to harp on, you know, say for instance, Ogun say like, I'm a Black man and I don't need to do that. What I need to do is I need to create a book that's so good that, you know, people are just going to look at it as like, damn, this is a dope comic book. Not that this is, you know, a dope Black comic book or anything like that. No, this is just a good book. And then they're like, oh, snap, I'm reading a dope book about 7 Black characters. And oh, snap, I'm getting these terminologies and these viewpoints that I don't know about.
Right. Because
I don't know about this school. I don't know what Imbury is. I don't know what the hell that is. You know what I mean? Like, I gotta look that up, you know? So for me, it was like, yeah, I'm just going to infuse this with my culture, not beat on it. It's just going to be authentically, this is who I am. This is my viewpoint. And here we go, you know? So ultimately, The Horseman is the comic book that I've always wanted to see.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. I could go 2 directions here. I think I'm going to go with, follow up with Griot Enterprises here. When you created it, do you feel good about its success and growth and where it is now? And what are your plans going forward with it?
Okay. So when Griot is, how can I say this? If you asked me at 28 when I started Griot,
yeah,
you know, as opposed to 20 years later, right? Mm-hmm. Or 28 when I launched and that sort of thing, you will get 2 very different answers.
Sure.
Okay. So the 28-year-old me, would he be like, actually the 28-year-old me, looking at what we did, now being at 48, 28-year-old me would be like, wow, I didn't even know that we could do the things that we did at the time.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
Technology. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. Not only that, but in terms of like goals and how goals change and shift, right? Because when I'm young, when you were young, I was like, man, I want everybody to read my book. I want to, I want to be rich, all this. I want to have the cartoon, blah, blah, blah. Again, that whole image model, that whole image mentality of success, right? Which didn't work because, I wasn't Jim Lee. You know what I mean? I didn't have, we didn't have that notoriety to make, our stuff as big as it was, right? However, what I had was tenacity, you know what I mean? Stubbornness, right? And flexibility. Okay. So, and also now I have wisdom of what the industry is. So, actually, Griot has gone places, that I didn't think it would go. All right. The fact that I have the Horsemen in the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art as part of an exhibition. You know what I mean? A long-term exhibition.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
On heroes and on, African heroes and, and they're linking it with the politics and that sort of thing. Right? I didn't know that would happen. I didn't know that I would be speaking at the Smithsonian. You know what I mean? About my comics, right? Like, that's a wildest dream fantasy. Like, I was joking around. Yeah, I want to be the Cornell West of comics. And then I get reached out from the Smithsonian. I'm like, oh, snap, I got to grow out my fro and widen the gap in my teeth and start wearing scarves. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know that would happen, right? In terms of like multimedia, in terms of like film and television and things of that nature, from the onset, I've had people come and be interested, you know what I mean? Gone through that thing. Right now, some things are happening, which I'm not going to mention until they're done because I've learned not to do that, right? Mm-hmm. Not to gum up the intent, you know what I mean?
Right.
Of what's happening. So those things are happening, right?
Okay.
And now I'm here. I'm doing interviews with you guys, and and having people, at this point now, having people calling me a legend or calling me a leader, pioneer, getting that acknowledgement. It's weird. That, to be honest with you, to be honest with you, it's weird, right? But I'm getting used to it. And what I mean by that is that it's weird because being in your own space and making your own work, and of course you have your own fantasies and your ideas of how it's going to go and stuff like that. But if it doesn't quite match up to your fantasy, you're always feeling like, oh man, I haven't achieved. I've been dealing with that for a lot of years, right? And it's only been in the past couple years where I've had to sit back and look at what I actually did as opposed to what I thought I was going to do. And seeing that what I actually did is more profound than what I'm going to do doesn't mean that, or what I wanted to do, it doesn't mean that what I wanted to do is not going to happen. But what it does mean is that, no, you gotta take a moment and realize what you've done and pat yourself on the back. Like my younger brother, Janny, was really been good on that. Cause I'm like, I don't know if I really did anything, even though blah, blah, blah. And I talk about my history and stuff like that. He's like, come on, man. He was the one that like 10 years ago, he was like, man, you're a visionary. And I'm like, yeah, come on, whatever. You know what I mean? But again, I cannot deny to an extent what other people see in what I've done.
Right. I hear you.
Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
You have an idea in your head what it's supposed to be, and it went somewhere different, but you have to realize that that's its own success, just even if it wasn't what you expected.
Exactly. And on top of that, it's like, it's not like people are calling me an asshole and stuff like that. They're calling me a leader, a pioneer and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, definitely I'll take that. And I appreciate that success, right? But now, because people are calling me this, that, and the third, all those grand titles, I'm like, crap, I gotta live up to that now. and the thing about it is that, again, I was talking with my brother about this last night, is that I have to live it up to myself. Right? Like I have to feel like I'm worthy of that title. And so that is the fuel that's pushing my work currently. And it's good fuel, because I'm glad you love the first issue of the Horsemen, because I'm looking at that, I'm like, man, that's 20 years ago. And I'm looking at the artwork that I'm doing now for Manifest Destiny.
Like, hurry up, RJ. Yeah.
Right. No. For me, as a creator, right? And actually, John talked about this earlier with Perez, about the evolution of Perez and his artwork. Right. And that's one of the things that I always loved about Perez. And that's why he's one of my heroes. And why I followed it, because he knew where he was weak as an artist. And he always worked on what he was weak in to become a better artist and a better creator. And I took that to heart, right? And even like some of the things he did with the photo reference, that sort of thing. I took all that to heart. So my art was always evolving. At this point, right now, the book that I'm working on currently is hands down the best art I've done so far for the Horsemen. And visually, like finally, like this book, I'm like, this is who Jiba Molei Anderson is supposed to be. So it's like, okay, my talent and my skills have finally come together in that sweet spot. And with all my favorite artists, when they hit that sweet spot, you can tell, like Brian Stelfreeze is in that sweet spot. Like Perez, in the sweet spot. The late, great John Paul Leon, I'm so gutted that he is gone. You know what I mean? Because we're the same age. We're about to be the same age. But his talent on Static, that's what made me fall in love with him. And he just got better and better and better and better and better. You know what I mean? To become like the Alex Toth of our generation. Hands down, right? So, I mean, those are the cats that I look at, right? Those are the cats that inspire me and intimidate me in the best way possible. And I feel that artistically right now, I've entered that intimidation territory. And so, so that's where my head is, you know what I mean? In order to do this stuff. And, I'm looking forward to getting it done, to getting it out so I can get it out there.
So does that intimidate you or excite you or a little bit of both, or?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. Like I said, over the past week, I did a couple pages, especially this page that I have done for the Horsemen that I just posted up there. Like after I got done with it, and I was up late. Actually, I knocked out 2 pages one day. I was up to like 4 o'clock getting this page done, 4 a.m. And when I got done with it, I just had to live with it for a couple of days, because I'm like, I would tell my students, with your work, you want the oh shit factor. Now, there's 2 ways of saying oh shit. Right. You either the first way is oh shit, right? The other way is like oh shit, And so when I got done with that page, like the first like oh shit factor, you know what I mean? I felt that, from me, like, and I felt like it was outside of myself. So I was like, oh, I'm excited and I'm intimidated, and I want to do it again. You know what I mean? And
Right.
and what I want to get, I want all of the pages in this book as I go on to be like, oh, yo, okay, all right, yo, you know what I mean? Let me take a step back and let me really feel the energy of the Orishas flow through me as I draw this book. You know,
that sounds great. That sounds amazing. John, I think we're right about the hour mark. What do you think?
Yes, we are, and I could do this for another hour, 2 hours. You know, just listening to what Jiba has to say, and you know, as he was talking, I was looking at some of the new images, you know, that he posted in the OG Nerds group, and I was sitting here listening to you and admiring your work and looking and just, you know, gushing and thinking, wow, you know, this is really inspirational to me, because there's so many different ideas, and it would be amazing if we could put a helmet on and then all the things that we see in our mind's eye could just, you know, be in
just pop.
Right. You know, maybe 200, 300 years from now, that'll be the case. But, you know, as it stands, there's a lot more to it. I want to extend the offer for you to come back for another interview at some point, because as you start to develop more of this, more of your work, like Season of Ice, you know, I'm like, you know, okay, well, so like we want to talk more about some of the actual projects and get a deep dive into those, you know, and people can always refer to this particular episode for background and everything like that. But then we want to, you know, I'm interested in doing interviews on specific projects that you have. So then that way we can focus on what you're working on a lot more. But I want to thank you for being here and agreeing to this interview. And I'm honored, you know, because I was like, yeah, I know he's busy. When I approached you, I was like, I know he's busy doing stuff. You'd be like, well, you know, maybe, I don't know, you know. And, you know, but I value your work, and I value you as a creator. So I wanted to not only have the time to talk with you about things, but I also want other people to know. I want to our viewers and listeners to know who you are and know why they should go out and purchase books from Griot Enterprises, and why that's important, and why, you know, I keep hyping on that. It's not just from a cultural perspective, but it's from a good storytelling perspective. It's from a good artwork perspective. And, you know, those things are very important when you're out here as a creator. It's not always about, you know, trying to keep up with the Joneses, as it were. It's about you telling a good story with good characters. And then from that point, then you will start to develop a following. You'll start to develop fans. You'll start to develop people who say, hey, oh my God, that's the bombest shit that I've ever read or ever seen. And, you know, and this is dope. And, you know, and then, you know, you build from there, because I'm more interested in telling a very good to great story than, you know, all the other things and all the other little perks and things of that nature that creators, you know, put into their work is great. And it has its place, and I love it. But the core of the story is the most important thing. And I feel like you've done that. I feel like you've done that. You're doing that. And I'm just honored that you agreed to be on our show today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored that you invited me to the show. So, you know, I definitely appreciate that. And I appreciate that you appreciate the work. And I would definitely love to come back and talk about, you know, especially the Horseman Manifest Destiny, because that's the big thing for the fall. About to launch the Kickstarter for Volume 7 of 4 pages, 16 bars of Visual Mixtape, subtitled Mass Appeal. That's going to launch end of May, beginning of June, you know? And so, yeah, that's going to be great. Like Volume 6 was really successful. I can't wait for people to, dig volume 7. And, I'm glad I put the first promo piece out there, and I'm glad that people are getting excited about it. So,
Yeah, is that everything? Because I was going to ask, what is up ahead that people should be looking for? I think you just hit on most of that, but was there anything you left off?
No, definitely. Around June, Kickstarter for volume 7 of 4 pages, 16 bars of Visual Mixtape.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in the summer, in August, look for the Kickstarter for the Horsemen Manifest Destiny. And
where can people find you?
You guys can find me on the Facebooks. You can find me either as Jiba Molei Anderson, or you can find Griot Enterprises or Horseman Graphic Novel on Facebook. On Instagram, I believe Instagram is either Jazz Intellect. It's probably Jazz Intellect. JAZINTELLECT. That's my handle on Instagram. That's also my handle on Twitter, I believe. Or you can just go to the website, www.griotenterprises.com. Griot is spelled GRIOT, so people can spell it correctly. And you can find us there. I also do a podcast show called Ghetto of the Mind, which is just me being DJ and musician. You can find that on iTunes. So those are places where you can find it.
Cool. And I want to thank John for putting your work in my face and telling me I needed to check it out. So when we do this again, I hope to be a little more educated. But I'm really much enjoying it so far. I'm looking forward to checking out the rest. And then when we talk again, maybe we'll get through the rest of the questions we had set up for you. But I want to echo what John said. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and speaking with us today. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had a great time. Thanks a whole lot.
All right. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Two Towers Talk Show. As our readers, our followers would know, I'm a published author, and if you want to check out what's going on with me, you can check me out at johnfallenauthor.com. And where can they find you, RJ?
rjsullivanfiction.com. There's a lot going on with me right now, getting my back library stock back in the house so I can do the signed copies, and also a brand new audiobook just went up this week. So you folks should be checking that out. I'm really happy with it. My narrator, Daniel Muthing, who has been a guest on this show, knocked it out of the park again on my short story collection.
All right. Absolutely. And I'm working on revamping my newsletter, and hopefully getting the book 2 in the Ivory Black series out this summer. So those are the two things that I'm working on at this moment. And then relaunching, as RJ, relaunching my catalog for sale sometime going into this summer as well. So exciting times all the way around. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Please leave your comments in our comments section. Let us know what you thought about this episode, and give us a thumbs up if you like the episode. We look forward to hearing from our viewers and listeners. Your feedback is very important. And also, if you're on Facebook, check out OG Nerds. It's a group for nerds of a certain age, 40 and over. But, we accept all people at the age of 18. So it's a good geeky place to be, and to interact with fellow nerds. So excellent. They are a partial sponsor of this show, so we want to make sure we give them that shout out. And until next time, stay nerdy. The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.